Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Life Chronicles and Deep Dives podcast. I'm here with Coach Cornelia, all the way in Romania.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back.
And my name is Coach Micah Ranjit here in the United States. Today, we're going to be talking about tolerance. In the world, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of things happening, a lot of ideologies, and a lot of people are thinking and believing different things. How do we explore tolerance?
So let's talk about the social tolerance first, because you can also talk about tolerance on the personal level with your partner or friends and family and so on. But I want first to talk about the social tolerance, which is very important for the times we're living in, right? What is tolerance, first of all? There is the tolerance is accepting uh, differences, right? We accept uh, that someone might have a different opinion from ours or might be different from us. When does it start and when does it end? What do you think, Micah?
So, like differing opinions, right? And that's like the hard part because everyone's got a differing opinion. Having tolerance is accepting that somebody else has a different opinion, right? I guess the hard part about having tolerance in the world today, especially in like a social situation, is detaching from the ego, right? So we talked about that in our last podcast, right? So
Yeah.
like if the ego is involved, it's hard to express acceptance through tolerance of somebody else, right? Of their opinion, right? Because like your defenses get up because there's a difference in opinion. It's almost like attacking your belief system, their difference in opinion. So your ego steps in, and then your defense mechanisms go up, and then it it's almost like you've put up a wall or a barrier between that position that the other person is presenting. So when interacting with other people, I think it's important to try to have that part of yourself and accept it, right? Tolerance for self presents outward. So if you've got tolerance to, okay, I'm getting defensive, okay, I can see how this is attacking my belief system. Now you are able to identify those things and then accept outwardly like a different opinion. You're working through those things. And that's how actual tolerance kind of comes into play, is being able to work through yourself to say, okay, here's this, here's this. I'm able to live. I'm not being attacked. Their opinion's not actually hurting me. It's just that I'm defensive because it's attacking my belief system, or their difference of opinion is challenging mine.
Yeah, and why this is very important because there's been along the centuries even there's been so many crimes because of the lack of tolerance. And I remember one case from France where there was a family with three boys, and one of them decided to change his religion the next day. He was found hanged, and everyone decided. It was in the 17th century in France, so it was different from the justice system that it is now. But the society decided that someone killed him because he wanted to change his religion, and they decided that the parents did it. And when the word spread, some judge decided that he's gonna judge the family, and they killed the father. They condemned the father to death because he allegedly killed the boy, which was not true. So it's been 13 judges who judged this case, and still they did this mistake, decided that he was guilty. The father was guilty, and they killed him. They decided to kill him. And then it became very hard for them to admit that they were wrong because it was 13 of them, right? And but at the same time, it was the point, a very important point in the justice in France when they started to change the system so that it won't happen. This is why I'm saying that it's very important for us to think about being tolerant, or as a society, because we've been talking about religion last time and how many people died because of different belief system, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then actually, that's where I was going to go as I was like listening to you kind of like talk about this, because you said that you switched religion. It wasn't true, right? So, if we look at the global stage now, we've got so many different religions, right? So many different political ideologies running around. Let's say running around, they're existing, right? But each one thinks that they're right, or, whatever, right? So, to have tolerance, right? So, if I'm living someplace, I need to be tolerant of what laws and rules they have. I need to accept them, right? I need to work towards that acceptance. Even in religious ideologies, if somebody has a different belief than me, I need to be tolerant that they have those beliefs. Now, how I make that distinction is if I'm tolerant of their beliefs, why aren't they potential, like, I mean, I'm not accusing anybody, but like, why aren't they the same? So come to you with a blank slate. I have a different belief, you have a different belief. Now, who decides, who dictates
Sure.
what is right in that situation? Well, if the easiest way to look at this is what I call not playing, right? So we come to the table, two people come together, boom, they have different agreements or different ideas. Now, if this person tries to dominate over this person, now this person, do they need to be tolerant of that dominance, or vice versa, right? So the easiest way to deal with it is, okay, I have different beliefs, I have different, governance, and boom.
Should be a reciprocity. When I'm tolerant, you have to be tolerant as well. It's impossible to have it just one side. That's what happened to this family I was talking about from France. Why did this crime happen? Why did the boy kill himself? Because he was afraid of being judged by the crowd, right? So he knew that he won't be tolerated by them. Why was the father killed? Because the crowd could not believe that the father wouldn't kill the son because he was changing his religion. So the lack of tolerance um, took to this really tragic case, right? This is a very small scale, right? But we have seen it with thousands of maybe millions of people dying because of this lack of tolerance. And this is something that should make us think about tolerance. We should become more tolerant, but not in all of the cases, right? We still have to amend some things sometimes.
Yeah. So I would say it's like tolerance to a degree, right? So in um, one of my other videos, I talk about on my personal channel, I talk about like setting healthy boundaries, right? Setting healthy boundaries is important, but it's also like it also has a little bit of tolerance built into it. So you set a boundary, you set an ideology, you have a belief system, whatever political belief. Being tolerant of other people's opinions and how they're living their life should be, is like should be uh accepted, and leaving people alone, right? I mean, that's essentially what it comes down to, right? Is
Exactly.
being tolerant doesn't mean dominance over somebody else, right? But it also doesn't mean that you have to accept tolerance. Now, to talk about back to the boundaries, you don't have to accept dominance. You set a boundary. Hey, you've crossed this line with me. I was tolerant up until that point, and now I have to move away from the situation. So, and that's a healthy way to deal with it, right? You're tolerant to a point, right? And then you have to move away from the situation. I think there's like an analogy that's it has something to do with animals, and I don't remember what it is, but it's basically uh like the alligator offers to take the animal across the river, or mouse or something across the river, but then it ends like
The scorpion
you know
is
what
trying. So the scorpion is asking the frog, "Can you please take me on the other side?" And the frog says, "No, I won't, because you're gonna kill me." If that's what you're talking about, and
Yeah, I think that's it. That's the one, right? You
yeah,
don't have to accept
mm,
like you don't have to be tolerant to the degree that it harms you. And I think that like I mean the analogy with the animal, the scorpion and the frog is a little bit different, but it's essentially the same thing. You don't have to allow and be tolerant of somebody that's hurting you or to abuse or infringing upon your right to live and be left alone. And the easiest way to get away from those is to remove yourself, right? Because if you go and even in some cases, like you try to like fight back against that dominance, I mean, they're not being tolerant, right? They're not tolerant of your belief. They have to put you under their umbrella. So how do you get away from that? There's only one way to get away from it, and that's to remove yourself from the situation. Because the more you give power over them, the more you tolerate their dominance, the more dominance they will try to impart. They'll try
yeah,
to put over.
yeah. At the same time, if you think about the social political decision that affects us, and affects us in a bad way, I mean, it's another thing that we should not be tolerating. And we should. How do you express your non-tolerance with this? Voting, right? Making amends with politicians and the ones that are in the power of decision, because it affects us in a big way, right? How social and political life goes, it affects us on a personal level as well. So that's another point where you can stop and say, I'm not going to accept this and this law or this decision for my well-being.
Allowing the government to just kind of run itself and this policy, that policy, this legislation, that legislation, right? We're being tolerant of the government. Oh yeah, here's this law that maybe takes a little bit away from you here, and this law here that maybe takes, right, we're being tolerant. Okay, yeah, the government's working for us, right? They're doing what we want it to do. We're being tolerant, right? Well, eventually that tolerance, just like the scorpion and the frog analogy, right, uh, means that you have like no way to express that grievance, right? You've given up so much through tolerance to
Yeah,
the entity. We'll not even say government. It could be any entity.
yeah,
It could be a abusive relationship. It could be
a co-
like a
where you
religion.
yeah, a company where you work,
Yeah.
it's anything. The main problem that I see is that in this moment, when we talk about social or political life, it seems like us being so tolerant, or maybe deciding not to get so much involved, it started to affect us so much to the level that no one cares about what we think. I mean, in at least in Europe, I haven't seen a decision to align with what people want for a very long time. So it's gonna get to a point where we won't matter at all, and that's a point where I'm a little bit afraid of. Right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because like what we were taught to be tolerant, like part of like our culture in America is to be tolerant of other people's opinions and beliefs and their freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and be tolerant. The problem comes when we're tolerant, we're trained, literally trained to be tolerant, to accept dominance. Now, and that's kind of like the scary part, because there out goes the window of expressing grievances and trying to redress it. There goes out, because you're not being tolerant. There goes different ideologies because you're not being tolerant, right? You'll
Yeah.
see that a lot. Uh, World War II, right? Hitler, Nazis wasn't
Yeah,
tolerant of the Jews, right? Across the globe, situations like that happen in houses all the way up to big governments, all the way up to like on a global scale. Train tolerance and intolerance of other systems, right? So we're trained to be tolerant,
but they are
but
not.
intolerant of right of other systems.
Yeah, that's very dangerous. It's a path that scares me so much, and I think there is a very fine line from the tolerance and not caring, right? So we became somehow we got to this point where we don't care anymore, or we think that it won't affect us. I think it's a very small part of the population who still cares about these decisions and still think about what's going to happen in 5 years from now on. But in my opinion, we should stop and think about it a little bit. We might wake up in 5 years and we won't have any rights anymore. And that's a
Right?
danger.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty scary.
Yes, it is.
uh,
Yeah.
because you're trained to be tolerant. Oh, the government's putting this law, this law, this law. Now, let's take it back just to like interpersonal relationships. So I mentioned briefly about like setting healthy boundaries. That's a four-step process if it needs to be. It's a three-step process, but it can be a four-step process. So you identify what your boundaries are. So this is I'm not going to be tolerant after this happens. You identify them, right? The
Yeah.
next part is communicating that boundary to whatever other entity, whether it's another person or something, right? You say, hey, look, if you cross this line, there are going to be consequences. The third step is to execute the consequences, right? So it could be like you're not interacting with this person as much. This could be you're not lending them something, money, whatever. But it's important to have those consequences of those boundary violations. So you've identified what they are, you've communicated them, they've still crossed that line. Now you have to have consequences. And then the last part is the fourth step, which it is remove yourself from the equation, right? Altogether, permanent. That allows that's you were tolerant, right? So I mean, you hypothetically, right? The person was tolerant throughout this process. I've identified to you, hey, don't do this. I've said, like this is what it is. I've communicated this directly to you, and you still did it. Now I have to remove myself from the situation. I was tolerant up until this point.
Yeah.
And I think that's important in relationships is to know when tolerance well, this could be government, knowing when tolerance turns into subservience, right? So like you're tolerant to a point. If you stay tolerant and you just keep allowing it to happen,
Mm,
uh, they're just going to steamroll.
sure. Yeah. It always happens. And I remember when I was younger, I never heard about healthy boundaries when I was 15 years old, 20 years old, 25 even years old. Or never, or only on a theoretical level, right? So, and in my mind, it was this idea that everyone should have the common sense to understand some general boundaries, but it's not like this. And it's for me, it was a very hard step to become intolerant at some points, right? And at first, I was so I don't know, I didn't know how to put those boundaries. I find it very hard to do it. um I mean, I found it very hard to do it because right now it's I become really too, maybe too intolerant because of being afraid of hurting and so on, right? So it is important to put these boundaries, and as you said, very important to tell the partner or whoever you put these boundaries for, to announce them. These are my boundaries. This is what will happen if you don't respect.
It's important to make sure that you communicate those boundaries. You can't expect somebody to be tolerant or accept a boundary if you haven't communicated.
Yeah, right. And I really want to underline it once more. It is very important to teach our kids what boundaries are, not only in relation with us, but with the world. This is how the world should go, right? If we want to become tolerant and have a better society, we have to understand other people's rights, boundaries, and so on. Is very important. And that's when I think this common sense that I was waiting for in around me, with people that are putting themselves some boundaries, like I'm doing. For example, if I'm talking to someone, I'm very careful and considerate on that person, not to hurt them or say something wrong, or I'm very careful. And this, if we teach our kids to do it since they are very young, I think it's gonna become, we're gonna have a better society where everyone is careful uh, with the others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think growing up, kids, right? You don't hear the word necessarily boundaries. You hear, like, hey, like uh, no physical contact, or like no using bad words with your friends or something like that. You'll hear stuff like that, but you don't actually hear the healthy boundaries and like communicating those boundaries outward, um, as I've structured it, as we would as adults. And I think it's important for kids to maybe start learning that. And you're right, society could be a lot different and a lot better if that was the case. If people were more willing to express their boundaries, right? Now, here's the catch, swing it back to tolerance. The other person or other people have to be tolerant of your boundaries. The person that's being tolerant is both people, right? So I've set a boundary, right? I'm tolerant up to a point. You break that boundary, I remove myself from the situation, right? Now, the other person, put yourself in the other person's shoes. The other person has to be tolerant of that boundary to interact with you, right? They have to be tolerant that of your opinion of that boundary. They have to accept it.
If we have to talk about this period of time where when we live in, where some people are trying to change reality and try to make us accept things that doesn't really exist, and they start to affect our kids and or even ourselves, that's when the tolerance should stop, right? When it starts to affect us. If it doesn't affect me, why would I care? Why would I get involved, right? I should
Right.
just accept it.
I'm
I remember.
tolerant that you have a different viewpoint, a different belief system, a different, I mean, if we're even going to go, we can even get a little political weird with this, right? Let's talk about like gender ideology. Here in America, we've got the LGBTQ AI plus, I don't know how many different, I mean, I'm not trying to make fun of it. I just don't know how many, different genders they've kind of like laid out. Now, I accept that that's what you want to believe about yourself, right? That's tolerance. I'm accepting that that's how you want to live.
Yeah.
I don't have to live that way. I'm allowing you to live that way without controlling anything that you're doing. Um, but then what I'm seeing is the other side is trying to make like my side, and I'm not even picking real sides here because I don't really care about, what the other person believes in. Believe whatever you want. um, they're trying to make that the other side, affirm them. And that goes back. Tolerance comes from accepting who you are. And once you can accept who you are and you know who you are, and you can establish boundaries to remove yourself from a situation or affirm yourself or impose consequences if those boundaries are violated, you don't need to, and I'm not saying like punishment, like removal consequences, then you don't need to make somebody else believe what you believe. So do what you want. Just don't make me do what you're doing. That's
I
essentially what it comes down to, right? Do what you want. Don't make me do what you're doing. But also, you don't need to be mean to me because I'm not doing what you're doing. That's, don't try to tell the other person how to live. And I'm saying that as I'm telling somebody, you don't do that.
Yeah, but at the same time, I remember it was a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, maybe longer, I don't know. We had this Eurovision contest in Europe, musical contest, the biggest one in Europe. And the winner was a guy from, I think he was from Austria, and he was a transgender guy. Conchita Wurst was his name, or his name, her name. I don't. Back then, you didn't have this problem with pronouns, and everyone was referring to him as a he. But he was wearing makeup or dresses, but still had a beard. It was something new for Europe, very very new, and I was so happy that people voted for him, and he won the competition. I attracted so much hate because of this fact that I liked the fact that he won the competition. He was very talented. He still is very very talented. So I've been very tolerant, also always thinking, what if my kid, what kind of world do I want for my kid to grow up in, right? How, if my kid is different, how do I want my kid to be treated by the world? Here comes this moment when this transgender ideology is pushing very very hard, and from the point where I was extremely tolerant and happy to see. I mean, in Denmark, you can see a lot of transgender person on the streets with no. Even before we talk about this in a social context, right? They were wearing dresses and high heels, and I was so happy to see them confident and being themselves and expressing themselves, right? And coming into this moment where this pushed ideology made me um, be much less tolerant, because I see this pushed ideology affecting our lives, our kids, my freedom of expression. So, in the name of their freedom of expression, I should not have freedom of expression. And this is why I was saying that the tolerance should be reciprocated. I should be tolerant, but you should be tolerant with me as well,
I
right?
think that's definitely a clear point. I mean, we totally agree on this particular thing, and that's where I kind of get to that point of, like, you believe what you believe, you express yourself the way you want to do it. I will express the way I'm, expressing myself, right? And I think now there's so much offense in the world, right?
Yeah.
People are taking offense to so many things. Um, for instance, and we're going to stay on this topic. It's quite controversial, so I'm going to try to stay, narrow with it. The idea that if you have this identity that you want to be, that I need to affirm that identity when it potentially, and I say it's not true, but so let's say if we're simply just doing male female, right? We're just going to do that, right? For this example, if you are biologically a male and you believe that you're transgender and like you're dressing as a woman, behaving as a woman, acting as a woman, right? If you are accepting, wanting me to be tolerant of that particular behavior, of that particular thought process, I have no problem with that. I'll call
Sure.
you, whatever you want, right? Do whatever you want. That's literally my favorite say. Do whatever you want, right? But I'm not going to believe that you're a biological woman, right? I don't have to,
Yeah.
right? Um, and that's part of and you're right, because of that ideology, people have drawn away from I mean, and you're seeing an increase in the population of transgender people, right? And I think that people are looking for acceptance, and they're, like behaving in different parts of their, psyche. They're like different parts of their body and different parts of, like there's so many different factors here. I don't know what's right, but what I do know is that whatever my belief system is and their belief system can coexist in kindness. Neither of us has to attack each other, but I also don't have to believe everything that you believe at the same time. And just because I don't believe what you believe doesn't mean that I should be getting attacked for that, or that just because the other person believes something doesn't mean I should be attacking them for it either, right?
Yeah.
And I don't go and attack people. I don't do anything. Just do what you want. Just don't attack me for allowing you to do what you want and not necessarily living the same as you. And I mean, we've seen this. We've talked about religion in the last podcast, a little bit in this one, right? Religious ideologies started most of the major wars on the planet because they were trying to dominate, control, and impart their will on somebody else, right? And if we look at, I'm not saying all people do this, but in trans ideology, there's a lot of that happening, right? But if everyone was just like, you do what you want, I don't, do what you want. You have your life, I have my life. We can still get along, but I'm not going to make you believe what I believe. I'm also shouldn't be required to believe what you believe. And I think that's kind of like the key takeaway here is there's so much divide in what's happening across the globe with religion, with politics, with gender ideology, and all of these things. There's the guise of acceptance, there's the guise of tolerance, but in reality, it's more of a divide. And I think that if people got together and they just said, okay, I accept that, and then let it go, we could probably have a lot more peace and a lot more productivity interpersonally, politically, religiously, uh, on the planet. You've got your stuff, I've got mine, and that's it. We're done. All right, cool. We could still have a conversation. Hey, I'm talking to you. We're getting a coffee. Hey, let's, do this. I'm at the movie theater. I still see you, right? I don't have to be your friend. I don't have to hang out with you on the weekends all the time, but I can still be nice and kind. And I think we're so far away from being nice and kind that we really need to get back to it. And creating healthy boundaries, working towards establishing that tolerance is important. Reestablishing tolerance across the globe, to me, is important, but also not pushing an ideology at the same time. Like somebody watching this podcast may not even believe or want to believe or take everything that I say, and they may say, I don't agree with any of that. Okay.
It's perfectly
Cool.
fine.
Right? That's fine.
The bottom line here is that, first of all, we are all human beings. It doesn't even matter if you're a man, a male, a female, or whatever else you are. We are human beings, first of all. And we have to get along somehow. You're talking about how many people are offended right now. And you're talking also, we've been talking about reciprocity in tolerance. I mean, and I really want to address this issue with pronouns. It's impossible for someone to know what are your pronouns, right? It's really impossible. And for you to get, not you exactly, but for someone to get offended because I didn't guess their pronouns, it's crazy. It really is crazy. And that's where I think that somehow things have to stop. And you can
also,
tell very nicely what your pronoun is, right? Not get offended.
let's say I'm interacting with you, right? And I say a pronoun, right?
Yeah.
If you haven't communicated that to me, right? There's that communication of you've established a boundary internally in your head. Have you communicated that to me, right? Well, if you haven't communicated that to me, how am I supposed to know? That's like
Exactly.
punishing somebody for a crime that they don't know. Right? On the opposite spectrum, requiring somebody to ask somebody their pronouns is an infringement of their autonomy, right? For
Yeah.
your autonomy, right? So you want this belief system and you think that's tolerant, but then you're requiring somebody else to abide by your belief system at the same time by making them ask you pronouns before they address you. I don't know if that's an issue. I think I've seen it some places where that might be a law where you have to ask somebody or address somebody by their correct pronouns. Now, like I'm not going to go out there and purposely mispronounce somebody or do something like that, right? If I do, sorry, and correct me, and I'll address you by whatever you want to be addressed by. I
Don't get
don't
so
care, right? If it's a requirement for me to ask you what you want to be called, right? So if I say, "Hey, Mr. Blue," and you're like, "That's not my name. My name's Mr. Cat." It's like, okay, cool, Mr. Cat, how you doing? Right? I mean, right? I would say I'm very tolerant of a lot of things. However, if my tolerance and acceptance is being abused, then I will react adversely to reset that boundary, right? And very, I mean, I get pretty angry if I'm being tolerant and then it's being abused. I will reestablish that boundary very fast.
mm,
So and hard. I come pretty hard with that. And the reason being is because that there needs to be that consequence. Hey, you violated my boundary. There's the consequence. I'm coming hard with the boundary. I'm gonna reset it. You keep doing it, now I'm out. Right.
yeah.
Um, and I even going through like an abusive situation, myself dealing with a covert narcissist, my boundaries were constantly violated, manipulated, whatever. And then eventually I had to put it back up. I had to say, all right, cool. I can't, like you don't want to communicate. You don't want to have open discussion. You pretend you do, but you don't, right? You don't want to fix the problem, even though you say you do, right? So you're, the mask and interacting with things and stuff like that. So, and it was just kind of like, okay, well, if that's the case, I know who I am. I'm setting a boundary. I don't want to see that person anymore. Like I don't want to interact with them. In fact, I try to stay away from it as much as possible. And that's kind of like where it comes down to. I've reestablished a boundary. Like I was willing to work with intolerance to try to correct a situation that had happened with that person. But
Yeah.
because they kept taking advantage, abusing that tolerance, I had to wall it up again.
Yeah, and that's what I feel about this transgender ideology. It's like, first of all, I think it's wrong to say that we are somehow tolerating them from a superiority level. No, it's not this. It's just accepting that someone is different, and I'm very willing to do it. I'm very willing to accept, and I'm celebrating the fact that we are different. But everything should have a limit, right? As long as you are asking for tolerance, you should give back some of it as well. You should be tolerant with me when I'm not guessing your pronoun, right? You should be tolerant with my kid in school if my kid likes is a girl and likes the blue color and can become uh, a victim of this ideology, right? I have many friends in this area that don't agree with what's happening. They don't identify themselves as part of this crazy part of the community where everyone has 1,000 pronouns, and I've seen a pronoun hell or something like this, or star, or I mean, how should I know that I have to call you like that, right? It's
Mhm.
impossible being thousands of them. And I think it should be a stopping point with the tolerance in this area as well.
Right. I mean, because there's so many different ways. Like, and that's part of like them having, I say them, that's part of like an individual having their own validation, right? So like if that's their pronouns, that's what they are, that's fine, right? Being forcing somebody else to do it the way that you see fit is the exact opposite of what you're trying to express in terms of being tolerance and acceptance for yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like two butting heads. Like, let's take it. We got this guy here. He says, there are only two genders, right? This guy says that there's, I don't know how many they're claiming there are now, but let's say there's this guy saying that there's several, right? If this guy is required to affirm this person's gender, which is not the two that he knows, then this person shouldn't, they like, you know what I mean? Like it can't be forcing the other person to believe that, right? The one that's this gender, this person has its own belief system. They're on their own. They're autonomous human beings, right? So they've got their own belief system. Just because you believe something, which is, one of many genders, doesn't mean that the other person has to believe that.
Exactly.
They can operate in a way that they accept it, but they don't have to believe it. You're right with the kids situation, right? People should be allowed to grow and learn about themselves. Where I see a problem coming in is the acceptance, the tolerance of pushing ideologies that are not, and I say natural because like there are generally two sexes, male, female. They're designed to procreate. We introduce something that's different at a younger age. We are opening a door, right? And maybe a kid does, grow into one of those ideologies. But the thing is that kid should be allowed to do that on their own.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be a push for that, right? There shouldn't be like, there should be acceptance, right? I accept that this kid is, gay, right? Lesbian, right? I accept that. But if I'm going, not me specifically, if I'm going to a kid and I'm saying, hey, look, yeah, if you like blue, you're probably a lesbian. If you like your hair short, you're probably right. And now you're telling the kid, right? You're pushing the ideology onto the kid. And I see this a lot. I don't see this a lot. I see this occasionally with parents when they want like the opposite sex kid, right? You see a mom who wants a boy. You see a dad who wants a girl or something, vice versa, right? You see the ideology push to fit the parent's needs, right? What the parent wants. Or in this case, if we're looking at it in schools, because they in America, they are pushing the trans ideology through to kids in school, right? That's you're training.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if someone is different, and I'm different from them, right? So if someone is transgender, it has a different identity from me. I'm different from them as well. So I'm not. It's not like the normal ones are these ones, and then the other ones are different, and so on. It's a difference, just like that, right? But pushing this ideology, it becomes unnatural. It should happen natural, and this is where the authentic transgenders are, where everything came natural, not pushing this ideology and putting in their little minds and fresh minds, right? And naive and innocent minds. You come and put some really some seeds there, right? Because for example, I had a friend in school who she was a girl, but she loved football. She loved the color blue and black. She was always wearing a hat. She was always with the boys, and she became one of the most beautiful women you can possibly see. So if someone would have came in school when she was in third grade, let's say, and started to push this ideology on her, and started with those treatments that you started to have in the States, what would have become of her? Because she wasn't anything. She was just loving football and the blue colors and so on, right?
And that's I do have an issue, right? And I'm tolerant. If you want it, if somebody wants to do this, go do it, right? I don't care. Um, and this is kind of how I feel, and on abortion too. Like, you want to do it, go do it. I don't care, right? I don't. It doesn't hurt me when you do it. So if that's what you want to do it, right? Do I agree that we should kill people? No. But does it hurt me? No. So at the same point, you know what I mean? I'm finding a good middle ground here.
Yeah.
With the trans ideology, right? Let's say we're introducing it into the younger kids, right? And now she's a woman. There's three types of castration technically happening right now at a younger age. You've got the mental castration, right? You've got the physical castration, mental chemical castration, and the physical castration, right? So now if somebody makes a choice at a younger age, right? Let's say, you got a 3-year-old kid that, somehow knows that knows their whole identity in the formative years of their life, which doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
And they make a life-changing decision because this ideology has been pushed, not available. Now, I'm not saying you don't make it available. What I'm saying is because it's been pushed on the kid, they make a life-changing decision, irreversible life-changing decision. And I've seen a few situations where somebody has transitioned and now they don't want that, right? Or they're having medical complications, or like whatever. So they're making irreversible changes because this ideology was not just available. They didn't say, I'm going to go seek this out for my own self. I want to learn about myself and figure out if this is what I want.
Yeah.
No, it was told to them that this is what they are, this is what they need to do, and this is how to do it. And that's
so
dangerous. I think that's societally dangerous.
and they are doing it, and it's gonna be my last point on this one. They are doing it so easily. I've seen a case with a girl. I mean, she was a girl now, but she used to be a boy, and she transitions and so on. And she's trying to get back and reverse everything and so on, and it's very hard and almost impossible. And she was saying that it was so easy to get into this. I mean, she said at school, I want to be a girl, or to the doctor from school or something like this, and they just sent her to a clinic. They just gave them gave her medications without asking anything, without any psychological tests and something like this, right? Not even waiting for a while or getting into therapy or something like this. They just put her on medication for castration, like you were saying, because she was a boy back then. It was a shocking case for me to see it, really.
Right.
It's lives that are destroyed forever.
I mean, and so let me, before I move, and we're going to close this out here pretty soon, but I want to go over the three types of the castration, right? Since we're moved into this topic, so we moved, and it's still on tolerance, because like I'm still tolerant that like the trans person wants to be trans, gay, lesbian, whatever, do whatever you want, I don't care. So the three types of castration: the mental castration, right? So if they're pushing the ideology, then the kid's not actually learning for themselves and discovering who they are. They're being told who they are.
Exactly.
So that's a mental castration, right? The chemical castration, that's like with the medicines that you're talking about, the puberty blockers, right? And those kind of things. Then you've got the physical castration, like gender affirming surgery, I think is what they call it, right? So of those three things, not only are they reducing, they're stopping bloodlines, genetic code from moving forward into the world. and that can be dangerous too, because a lot of, like, I mean, there's not going to be anybody to carry on that family line if there's only one kid. I think there is a possibility for that to be some sort of population control for that ideology push. I don't know, but um, that is inherently dangerous to tell somebody what they are rather than let them discover who they are. And I think that's kind of like where I see things going, but I'm tolerant of somebody, whatever they want to be. And I think that's also something on the other, like both sides, right? The other side's like, there's only two genders. The other side's like, oh, there's many genders, right? But they don't ever really meet in the middle and say, okay, we believe different things and we can get along. It's not killing it's not hurting me to
Mm,
allow you to, it's not, that's it. That's literally all it is for tolerance. It's not hurting me to allow you to believe what you want to believe, as long as you're letting me believe what I want to believe, or I'm going to leave.
yeah, or
Look at that. That rhymed.
yeah, I really believe in what you are saying, that this pushing of ideology, and not only in transgender, it's many different topics these days happening.
Religious, political,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's done from somewhere above us, right? Because us normal people, we can deal with each other. That's my opinion. I respect you, respect me. If we don't do, somehow we get along, we can do it, right? But when someone or some people are coming and pushing these things and divide us, that's, I think it's the main interest that it's happening here, to be a huge division in the world on so many topics. That's where our tolerance should stop, and we shouldn't accept something like this pushed on us.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've had an exciting episode. This has been pretty great. We moved from several different topics, but we still kind of maintained into the realm of tolerance and just kind of how that flows in and out. So we'll catch you guys in the next one. If you have any questions for either of us, leave them in the comment section below. Our websites will also be in the description box. So feel free to check those out, and we'll catch you next time.